I am adequately terrified. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you are new here, welcome to my channel and welcome to another scary true story time. I just finished up filming last week's true story time collection of scary stories, and today's video is actually going to be the story that I couldn't fit in that video. It is chilling. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. When I was in high school, I lived in a 100-plus-year-old house that belonged to the first mayor of the town. The house has had many occupants over the years and has been added onto and renovated many times as well. Over the years, we had small occurrences happen. There was always a feeling of being watched. Pictures would suddenly fall off the wall. There was also sometimes a smell of old perfume in the air, but it was only in random spots. The cat would randomly hiss at things out of nowhere, and we would hear sounds of what sounded like children's footsteps running down the hallway. And on top of this, my mum would also see a small boy in her sleep, and he would always say, "Mama." So there was an exceptional amount of creepy stuff that happened and went on when I lived there. But this by far stands out and gives me goosebumps. I was home alone on a regular school night. My mum worked 2 jobs to help support us, so she wasn't at home. It was just me and my cat Kringle. About an hour, I'd say, before this event even occurred, I had been in the back dining room walking around. I was talking on the phone to a girlfriend and then another friend of mine. My mum and I barely go into the back dining room because it was really just a nice room for show. So the room, especially the dining room table and chairs, were always untouched. Fast forward, I was in our den doing homework. The house was really quiet, and all of a sudden, out of pure silence, I heard the sound of what sounded like furniture being moved. The house had old hardwood floors, so you could easily hear the screeching. It kept going for about 2 minutes or so, and I was frozen. My first 2 thoughts were that A, someone was breaking into the house, or B, the cat was back in there messing around. But I realized that B wasn't an option, because as I looked down next to my feet, my cat was there, and on top of that, my cat was standing up, wide-eyed, and looking down the hallway. This hallway connected the living room to the dining room. I got up slowly, and I grabbed a pocket knife. I walked towards the back, but my heart was pounding, and I don't recall being able to breathe. The air got really cold, and suddenly I got weird chills all over my body. I wanted to run and go back. I wanted to run that badly, but something prompted me forward. I turned the corner. What I saw, I will never forget. When you turn the corner in my old house, you immediately see the dining room table. It faces you long ways. And mind you, I had just been back there, so everything was supposed to be untouched. Well, when I turned the corner, all of the chairs had been turned around, and they had been organized in a single filed goddamn line. I bolted, I grabbed Kringle, and I ran outside. That's when I called my mum and I told her that I wasn't going back in until she got home. And here's another thing that happened. Right next to our house was a small guest home. It was originally part of the property, but years ago, when our landlord bought the property, he decided to split both places. This was so that someone could be paying rent in both houses. This essentially meant that we both shared the same backyard. We knew our neighbor quite well, and one day, while I was at school and my mum was at work, my neighbor was in the backyard doing some gardening. He told us that for some reason, he felt like he was being watched. And eventually, he turned around in the direction of our house and saw an elderly lady wearing a blue nightgown. She was sitting in a chair in our sunroom, just staring off into the distance. He said that he waved politely at her, but she never moved a muscle or even realized that he was there. He said she didn't even blink. She was just staring with a cold, blank expression. At first, he believed that it was more than likely my grandmother or maybe another family member. They said they thought that the person in the window just had something like dementia. A week later, our neighbor went to the restaurant where my mum works. That's when they ran into each other, and that's when he mentioned it. My mum thought that they were crazy because our grandmother didn't live with us, for one, and didn't drive. Secondly, our grandmother is completely sane. Also, my mother and I are the only people who have keys to the house. This was one of the first major events for us while we were living there. About a month or two later, I was telling this story to some friends at school, and that's when my teacher overheard and chimed in. She said that she used to be babysat at that house when she was a little girl. She said that she used to be babysat there by a woman named Olive. Olive would always sit in the sunroom and play piano. And what got me the most was that she said Olive used to wear a blue nightgown, but I hadn't even told anybody what she was wearing yet. So she had to have been telling the truth, and I knew from this that it had to be the ghost of Olive. Also, on the first night that we moved in, it was pretty weird. We'd been moving all day and my mother was exhausted, so she turned in early. I told her good night, that I loved her, and we went our separate ways. Our rooms were right next to each other, and I want to make 2 points about the house. As I said before, the house is very old. The walls itself were very much hollow, and you could hear the person basically breathing in the next room. On top of this, the doorknobs in all of the doors are antique, and they're crystal knobs. The knobs are extremely loose, so whenever you entered a room, you barely had to turn the knobs because usually the door would just push open. So back to the story. My mum had gone to bed, and I was lying awake. I was doing a little bit of unpacking, setting up my PlayStation, my TV and whatnot. I remember not being able to find something in particular, and the only place it could have been was in my mum's room, since the only boxes left to unpack were in her room. I blew it off and said that I'd just wait until morning. I got into bed and I started trying to settle down, when all of a sudden I hear loud footsteps coming from my mum's room. Now, I'm not talking regular human footsteps. I'm talking about bull elephant stomping footsteps. I thought it was pretty weird at first, but my initial reaction was, I guess mum's awake. But I wondered how she was able to make those sounds. Now, my mum is extremely small. She is petite in size, and I'm pretty sure if she tried to stomp on a mouse, she wouldn't be able to make a dent. Anyways, I figured since she had woken up, I could go and look for my lost item. So I got up, I headed towards her room, and I remember being unusually cold. I slowly pushed open her door, but she was still in bed. She was snoring and she was out cold. Now, there was no way she could have fallen asleep that fast, but I said, oh well, I shrugged it off and I went back to bed. The next morning when I got up and I went downstairs to the kitchen for breakfast, I asked her why she was stomping around so loud in her room last night. My mum looked confused for a moment and said that she never got up once. That's when I thought she could have been sleepwalking. But then my mum asked me what I needed from her room last night and why I was jiggling on the doorknob so much. First off, I remember specifically not touching the doorknob that night because there was no need to. I just pushed open the door. Secondly, I never even stepped foot into her room at all. All I did was peek in because I didn't want to wake her. So then when I told her that I didn't even go into her room, she asked me why I kept whispering Mama into her ear. We both shared silence for a little while and we never spoke of it again. My breakfast was hot and delicious, but I still felt cold. There was another instance in this house where I'd fallen asleep one night. I fell asleep so hard that I never moved once and my bed was still made pretty neatly. I had fallen asleep with the TV off and the remote was at my nightstand. It was about 5 a.m. when all of a sudden I was awoken with a powerful jolt. The jolt came from the end of my bed, and it was the kind of jolt that you felt when someone sits down or gets up at the end of a springy mattress. I woke up frantically, thinking that I had jumped in my sleep or that my cat had jumped down. I looked at the end of the mattress, and I saw a perfectly made butt print rising from the cushioned comforter. I was stunned, and I realized that the cat wasn't even in my room that night, so it couldn't have been him. And what was even weirder was that my TV had been turned on. And another time in this house, I had a friend over who was taking a shower in my bathroom. When he got out of the shower, he got an abnormal chill and suddenly got the feeling of being watched. Now, it's a very small bathroom, so claustrophobia set in. He tried to get out of the door, but the doorknob wouldn't budge. Now, these are the same doorknobs that you don't even have to twist. He started screaming and saying, "Get me out of here." When we tried turning the doorknob, it still wouldn't budge. And that's when he got really quiet and shakingly said, "Parker, something's touching my shoulder." And at that moment, the doorknob became loose and the door just creaked open. It took a really long time before my friend would calm down. Luckily, the ghosts in that house weren't insidious in nature, or at least to us. I don't care what anyone says though, ghosts are real. So that's me done for the night, guys. I really hope that you didn't watch this at nighttime, but if you did, I'm sorry. I think a lot of people, if they're experiencing paranormal activity, kind of just know from the feeling they get whether or not the presence is happy or lonely or insidious or there to do them harm. So yeah, I guess that's probably just they know from the feeling that they got that it wasn't insidious. Nevertheless, I am adequately terrified. Give this video a thumbs up if you like me doing these types of videos. I do a true crime Sunday every single Sunday, and I also do other people's story times. So if you have an experience that you'd like me to turn into a storytime video, submit it at submitstorytime@gmail.com. Make sure you include all of the details. Don't leave anything out, because that is what makes these stories unique, interesting, and amazing. But if you do send me screenshots or photos, cross out people's faces and names, because it will always remain an anonymous story time. And on top of that, I would love to have you on my team. So if you like my vibe, click subscribe. So you guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.